Welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of college basketball. This senior class has finally conquered Evanston, Illinois, and the Northwestern Wildcats. Yet it wasn't any one of the seniors who really won Purdue this game. But without further ado, let's run it. This one ends in a final score of Purdue 70, Northwestern 66. Much more of a battle than I would have hoped. I still found myself shaking my head a lot during this game, but we battled, we never quit, and our Lord and Savior CJ Cox came in and lit up Welsh-Ryan Arena. I appreciated the battle, the adjustments, and the fighting through the crowd and an arena that we haven't been able to win in since 2022. But this was the annual CJ Cox game, similar to the Alabama game last year. But he joins an elite list of players after this game who have scored 20 plus points in both their freshman and sophomore seasons under Matt Painter. And that list includes Robbie Hummel, Etwan Moore, AJ Hammonds, Caleb Swanigan, Jaden Ivey, Zach Edey, Braden Smith, and now CJ Cox. So that puts him in amazing company and leaves me even more excited for the future of him and his role with his team going forward. But for now, he is playing some of his best basketball right now and proving why he needs to be on the floor. He scores 27 points in 28 minutes. Really could have been more minutes. You still got 12 minutes out of Jakari Harris in this game. And to be completely honest, I don't really agree with it. And the stats back it up. Jakari Harris, in his 12 minutes, scores 3 points on 1 for 5 shooting, 1 for 4 from three, a rebound, and 2 assists. Just couldn't find his shot, even though he shoots way better on the road from three than home, which is still, very confusing to me. He shoots like sub 30% from three. Honestly, it might even be sub 25% from three at home and shoots like 50% on the road. Well, that wasn't the case in this one. And quite frankly, I have a rather simple fix for a lot of these issues, but I don't really know, and I don't think, unfortunately, that Painter and the coaching staff will implement this. And the simple answer is shorten the rotation. I know you've been going like this nine deep for, the majority of the season, and, in a lot of games, a lot of these guys provided quality minutes. But recently, that has not been the case. You really are not getting almost anything out of your bench recently. And I think an answer to that is limit the minutes for some of these guys. Some of these guys, quite frankly, just need to get cut out of the rotation for now. You're getting into the postseason where you need to be playing your best basketball and you got to be playing the guys that are giving you the most contributions. It's no longer like, oh, we gotta see if we can get, some good stuff out of them. In the last 3 games, I want to read some stats on the plus minus numbers. These are the stats that I just really love to see, and that's why I'm glad that I'm focusing more on this true plus minus now. In these last 3 games, Daniel Jacobson has been negative 34 in 20 minutes. Negative 34 in 20 minutes. Getting outscored more by more points than minutes played is, first of all, difficult in its own right. But second of all, to do it in a 3 game span like this, with as few minutes as he's played, he's only played 20 minutes across those 3 games, and we've still been outscored by 34 with him on the floor. That's bad. He has looked really bad, and I don't know if it's his confidence, if it's because he looked serviceable for various games. He had some pretty darn good games in the non-con, and even early in Big Ten play, he still had some decent games. But as of late, he looks out of it. He looks like he's not battling, like he's not rebounding, like he can't find his place in the offense. He's just out of sorts. And unfortunately, right now, it looks like your best bet is to just keep him off the floor. And despite some of his really good play recently, in the past 3 games, Omer Meyer has been struggling a bit more as well. He did have 3 games ago, he was plus 6 in his 9 minutes there. but in the totality of these last three games, he's -4 in his 36 minutes. Because 2 games ago, he was -11 in 11 minutes. So not super pretty for him lately. The shots haven't really fallen in these last two all that well, and that's obviously been a big part of the reason of his, minutes not being quite as productive. That's really a big part of what he brings when you put him in around a lot of our starters and a lot of the big three. If you have him on the floor, either with Braden or without. His shot making is really what brings a lot of value right now. So if he can get his shot back, here heading into the postseason, I think he's still worth being in this rotation. But he definitely has struggled a little bit more lately than he was, in the couple games before where he was really starting to light it up here in Big Ten play. Another guy who's struggled a lot recently is Jack Benter. He struggled overall to shoot three ball in Big Ten play. He was lights out in the non-con, and then we get into Big Ten play, and he's only shot something like I don't know. I think it's like low 30s, low 30s, maybe even high 20s. I think it's low 30s though, from three. And in the last three games, he's -14 in 55 minutes. So he's seen the most minutes just between TKR being in foul trouble and moving TKR down to the five sometimes and Benter sliding in at the four. He's seen the most minutes out of these four recently. But the problem is like, again, if he's not making his threes, he's going to struggle um, to provide a lot of presence outside of the fact that he still is a pretty decent defender and he's still a pretty decent rebounder, but he hasn't really been doing either one of those at a particularly high level either recently. And really, quite frankly, those minus numbers all come from 3 games ago where he was -14 in 16 minutes. He was flat zero in 23 against, let's see, I think that would have been against Ohio State and flat zero in 16 minutes in this game. But the last one is Jakari Harris, who I started this off talking about. He has also been really, really, really bad recently. And it's tough because I want him to play better. I want all these guys to play well. But you got to listen to, what's happening right now, and you got to be able to adjust. He's -35 in 40 minutes across the last 3 games. So just about the same numbers as Jacobson, just in double the minutes. Not nearly as bad as Jacobson, because obviously when he's playing a lot more, but still not good. And a big part of the reason why Jacobson and Jakari's minutes or numbers look as similar as they do in terms of the plus minus is for some reason, I'm sure they have their reasons, but you find Jacobson and Harris getting subbed into the game together. You find them in the game a lot. And the problem is with they're both not playing super well and they're both not playing to their strength right now, those minutes now we're losing those minutes by even more than if you put each one of these guys out there individually with some of our higher contributing guys. And that's just been a really bad recipe recently. So when it comes to the rotation, the idea that I have in my head is you really can just go with Clough and TKR at the five. Got to be honest right now, with him out of sorts, you can't afford the losing those, even if it's the 5 minutes that we keep losing massive numbers or massive amount of points in Jacobson's minutes. You kind of just got to cut Jacobson out of minutes altogether right now. You got to get CJ Cox playing 30 to 35 minutes. I get that, we love our depth and, maybe with him being the main on-ball defender that he's going to have, more games or just more tiring minutes always being that defensive stopper on the offensive end or sorry on the defensive end, but on the offensive end he's off ball a lot. Like he's standing outside. A big part of the reason he had this massive game was he was just the beneficiary to a lot of kick out threes where he was just wide open in the corner. And you get that a lot with where he exists within this offense. So if he's not utilizing a ton of energy running around and doing a bunch like Braden Smith might be, you can afford to, let him expend more of his energy on the defensive end, knowing that he'll still be ready on the offensive end when his time comes, regardless of whether or not he's as electric as he was in this game. But I think the same goes for Fletcher. You got to have him for the 30, 35 minutes. He hasn't been shooting as, truly elite as he was in that recovery stretch from his big slump, but he's still shooting, perfectly fine. He was 2 for 6 in this game, and quite frankly, could have easily been like 4 for 6 if he just knocked down his literally almost wide open ones. But outside of that, Braden, just play him all 40. You play him all 40 in this game. He's very capable. Even if he's not playing his best game like this, he's still our by far best option with the ball in his hands leading this offense. So when it comes down to crunch time and when it comes down to these games against, top tier opponents, whether it's Big Ten tournament or NCAA tournament, ball needs to be in his hands. Just leave him in the game as long as he's not in foul trouble. I think you still want to get Omer in the lineup just because of the way he's been shooting the ball lately, even if he struggled in the last two. Give him the backup minutes for both CJ and Fletcher. So you give him about, anywhere between, 7 to 10, maybe even upwards of 12, depending on the minutes. If you get both CJ and Fletcher closer to 30 minutes, you'll get him in double digit minutes there. I think you have TKR playing 30 to 35 at either the 4 or 5, depending on, when Clough needs to come out. If you deal with foul trouble, if either of them deal with foul trouble, obviously, things get shifted around a lot. But if they don't, use TKR on both of those spots, depending on game script, depending on, a whole lot of different things. I think, Clough plays as close to 30 minutes as he can. Just I like, he plays 30 minutes in this one. He looked effective in those 30. He was able to stay out of foul trouble. He ended up with three fouls, but he was never in, danger of, oh, we have to take him out because he's in this foul trouble. So focus on that. And with that, put him in drop coverage. Just do it. The hedge isn't helping us be that better of a defensive team. At least if you're playing in drop coverage, there's a whole lot better chance that we're not going to give up a bunch of straight line drives to the paint. So, and it keeps Clough in the paint for rebounding purposes, keeps TKR in the paint. If he's the one guarding the ball screen, it's just going to be better for both rebounding and making sure we're not giving up a bunch of baskets inside. And other than that, I would say Jacobson is your break in case of emergency foul trouble. You bring him in for a couple minutes if you need to, if you're in real bad foul trouble, like we were in the Ohio State game. But other than that, it now is not the time to keep trying to experiment and see if he can find his mojo back. I know that the shot blocking would be great, but he hasn't been a very good shot blocker in his very limited minutes either recently. So it's not like you're getting that with him on the floor too. It's just you can't afford those minutes where Purdue is losing massively, like we have over these last couple of games. So that's my idea for the rotation. I think it would help us massively. You get guys like CJ Cox who have been massive pluses in the lineup recently. You give them more minutes. You keep some of the better defensive lineups out there in terms of the fact that Chikari hasn't been defending well recently. Jacobson has not been defending well and been getting a bunch of fouls while he's been in. And then you utilize, your two guys off the bench. You go 7 deep. You utilize your two guys off the bench as needed and as the game script, dictates. And I think it would work a whole lot better for Purdue. I think it would keep a lot of our best players on the floor. Not having a bunch of minutes off or a bunch of different breaks where they kind of lose their momentum. Because a lot of times you see these guys get in rhythms, and we talked about the rhythm that Clough got in, where you take him out and all of a sudden he's not the same player when you bring him back in. If they're on a roll, leave him in and let them, play that out. So I don't know. We'll see if Painter shortens the rotation at all. We've seen him do that before in some previous years where, things you start to get into postseason play and you shorten the rotation, kind of tightening things up, just run with the guys that are your most trustworthy, not necessarily embracing sort of the deep bench, large rotation. And kind of leaning a bit heavier on your stars because that's what you rested them for. You rested them for them being healthy right now and playing their best basketball and not beat up and not exhausted. So now's the time to use them, unleash them, let them take over. But getting more into the actual game now, the first half was bad, very bad. And it started off especially horribly with the way, especially that Northwestern was guarding us. They trapped ball screens heavily. They didn't just hard hedge. They actively pushed Braden back, similar to the way Houston tried to do last year to Braden. But the way that Braden responded this year just felt a lot less aggressive. There was a lot of times, most times, where he would come off those screens just very passively and kind of allow himself to be pushed back rather than, kind of taking the stunt dribble to try to, get him to back off a little bit, create that space and fire a pass away. You found him holding onto the ball a lot more, and for a lot longer, getting almost trapped back at the half court line. Um, and it made him hesitate. It made him lose confidence in his ability to navigate through, around, over the top of of their traps. And he just did not have a good game because of it. Both in that first half where he had at least one bad turnover. He had one turnover where he just fired it over CJ's head in the corner, trying to navigate out of a trap. And then outside of that, he didn't get almost any offensive opportunities. When he did, he wasn't really in rhythm because he wasn't getting his own shots, his own playmaking like he does just kind of passively throughout the game most of the time. So it just wasn't great overall because even if he was able to navigate out of those doubles, get those passes off, a lot of times he was so far away from the basket, so far away from the 3-point line, that it gave Northwestern a lot of time to recover, to avoid being, massively out of their rotations like it tends to do in the doubles. But it caused a fair amount of turnovers. Purdue, only averages a little over like 9.5. I think they're up to like 9.7 turnovers per game. Well, they had 8 turnovers in the first half, or no, 9 turnovers in the first half alone, and 14 on the game. So they cleaned it up more in the second half, when our offense really heated it up. But in general, even when Purdue's offense was heating up, Braden was off just because he could never really get in that rhythm from the first half of the game. There was, at least one three where Braden got a kick out three wide open. It wasn't even close. Like it was like short off to the side of the rim. And I was like, "Ew, that's just not great." So, not many teams are going to try to defend him like that. Not many teams have the athletes or have worked on that type of trap enough to confidently do it against Braden. I think it's something that Chris Collins likes to try to do and likes to try to do specifically to Braden or elite point guards. And Braden's handled pressure and handled traps like that a whole lot better in the past. There was just something about this game that just kind of shell shocked him from the jump, and he wasn't able to, quite recover from it throughout the course of the game. But another interesting thing is they kind of did the same thing to the post, and it really messed up TKR and Clough pretty badly to start the game. They typically tried to trap off of the other big, either if the other big was already in the paint and like on the opposite block, or if we got the ball into somebody like TKR, and then you have like Clough cutting through, and they would trap off the cutting big, and they would utilize that, and then have the backside wing essentially try to cut off whatever big that was then in the paint there that they left, and then essentially dare our guys to try to navigate an aggressive double team and pass over the top, to the opposite wing across the floor. And sometimes we were able to get passes off. Typically, they weren't very clean, if we completed them, and some of them just flat out turned into turnovers. There was a couple of errant passes, including like the second possession of the game, for Purdue. Clough lost the ball on a repost after a scramble drill where TKR got doubled, and then also got trapped himself in the mid post in the next possession. And then Clough soared that pass out of bounds to the Northwestern bench. And, right after that, TKR travels the next possession trying to force his way through a triple team in the paint off of a short roll. So those two really struggled with the interior pressure a lot early on. TKR even looked really bothered by Arrington Page and his size and strength in the few times that he was able to get one-on-one coverage. So TKR had a really, really rough start to the game, in terms of scoring and the turnovers as well. But they recovered and adjusted majorly in the second half and ended up with 5 assists between our starting front court between those two. But because of those struggles early, they still ended up with 6 combined turnovers, 4 for TKR and 2 for Clough. The first half as a whole, as I mentioned, was just really bad basketball to watch. We only had 25 points at halftime, just 44% from the floor and 27% from three. We just looked rattled. And that was our lowest first half point total of the season. Even against Iowa State, when we got ran out of the gym, we had 31 points at halftime. It was the second half where things truly unraveled. But We settled down and we followed it up with 45 points in the second half while shooting 62.5% from the floor and 46% from three. We flipped the script entirely. A lot coming from the fact that they switched up the defensive style a bit. It was very interesting to me because of how much success they had in the first half. They did still kind of do some doubling or some trapping off the ball screens, but it seemed like it was a lot less aggressive. And yes, Purdue did also change their sort of offensive style in a way to try to run some more sets that didn't just involve a ton of ball screens at the top, just to try to get things going. But we still went back to the ball screen a fair amount in the second half, and it looked a lot different. Braden was able to push that big back instead of getting himself pushed back to half court, and he was able to then create that space between the two defenders to hit the short roll, to find space to hit to the wings, and that's how he was able to end up with 9 assists on the game, even if he did end up with a fair amount of turnovers. And three out of Braden's four turnovers were in the second half, which was rather interesting, given the fact that the offense or the defensive style was more aggressive. To throw him off his game in the first half, but that's just kind of, how it ended up going. Um, but going into, some of these specific guys, TKR, I talked about his bad first half. He had 4 points, 3 rebounds, 3 turnovers, and 2 fouls in the first half. Ends with 11 points, 10 rebounds, 2 assists, ends up with those 4 turnovers. But again, you get a double double out of him in a game where, obviously he got thrown off really hard to start. And the big thing is we have to figure out how to get him going early. There's been too many games this season where TKR just has a really bad first half, looks out of it, like, isn't getting to his spots, or in the Ohio State game, refusing to spin back over the right shoulder. And then all of a sudden in the second half, he just wakes up and, starts dominating. He didn't quite dominate in the second half this game, but also a big part of the reason is there was a lot more emphasis on the outside, especially when CJ started taking over. But I'm certainly not going to complain about a double-double in his 29 minutes, and the fact that he was able to keep out of foul trouble in this one with just 2 fouls. Similar reaction to Clough. He ends up with 9 points and 7 rebounds on 4 of 5 shooting, so he was very efficient in his opportunities. 3 assists, 2 turnovers, a steal, and a block. So he definitely had a bit better defense overall this game than some recent games, but still, there was a lot of times where, because we're so willing to switch, you were getting guards being able to go one-on-one with Clough. You were getting Martinelli being able to go one-on-one with Clough. And that's just a bad recipe, A, for his foul trouble, and B, for our defense as a whole. Whether it be the guards, trying to break him down and then shooting from the outside, or Martinelli just being able to take him off the dribble and, either getting all the way inside to the paint or just getting Clough off balance to make a move in like the mid post that Martinelli loves doing. It's just not a recipe for our success. So it would be great for Clough and for the team as a whole for us to A, not allow him to switch so easily. Like, yes, if it's a really good screen and you have to switch, do it. But in some of those kind of soft, more general lackluster screens, fight through it, maybe do a stunt, but try to allow the main defender to get back to that ball handler so that we don't just end up going one-on-one mismatches all the time. It's obviously a massive part of the reason why Keaton Wagler went for 46 against us, and it's a massive part of the reason why you let Martinelli go for 28, because he was able to get pretty much whatever he wanted in terms of the matchup and kind of like the type of shot in the second half, even though he didn't necessarily knock all of them down. He didn't shoot super efficient. Um, but got to move on and talk about CJ. I've talked about him plenty, yeah, plenty, but his whole stat line was incredible. Like I said, 28 minutes, he scores 27 points on 10 of 13 shooting, 5 for 8 from three. So just unbelievably efficient. His only misses were from 3-point range, and you see then he was a perfect 5 for 5 for 2-point range. So as hot as he was from the outside, it built his confidence in his mid range, in his ability to still score on the inside a little bit. But outside of that, he had 3 rebounds and 3 assists as well. All 3 of those rebounds were offensive rebounds. He tied Clough for team lead in offensive rebounding. And he got, at least one of his buckets on, cleaning up a miss on the inside. They just kind of forgot about him. And that was huge for us down the stretch. He was great for some of those second chance points. So, he was just super efficient in his opportunities. I really feel that the last bucket of the first half, I believe that ended up being his sixth point. He had 6 points in the first half, 21 in the second. But that shot to end the first half, I think really was a catalyst for getting him going. It was, a little fadeaway mid-range jumper there outside the elbow, and it looked pure. And all of a sudden, he came out in the second half, and he was just on. So I would love to get him, more involved outside of just kind of the catch and shoot threes that he typically gets throughout the course of our offense. I think, as you saw in this one, he can be really valuable in a lot of those other situations as either a one-on-one scorer, or, run some sets where you get him coming off the ball screen and let him try to get downhill, kind of similarly to, what we do with Omer Meyer, and allowing him to get some working in the mid-range. Because CJ's mid-range is, I would say, highly underrated because it's not really talked about much, but it's looked pretty damn good throughout a lot of this season. Um, and then going on to Braden, like I mentioned, he was just off, caused by a lot of the defense in the first half. And when he even got a couple of those shot opportunities in the second half, he was just cold because he really just didn't get any in rhythm shots to kind of see someone's fall, and feel good about it and get into that rhythm that he needs. He plays all 40, but he only has 7 points on 1 of 5 shooting, 0 for 3 from three. But the big thing for him is he was able to get to the free throw line late in crunch time with that three that he got fouled on. And also, I believe he got a big man caught in a pump fake, and was able to get to the line again, sinking all 5 of his free throws. But he added on 3 rebounds, 9 assists, and 4 turnovers, like I mentioned earlier. So good to see him get, some of those assist numbers back up, in the way that we were able to share the ball throughout the course of the second half. Obviously, just want to clean up those turnovers because he still had a couple of really shaky turnovers in the second half there that almost lost it for us if it were not for a couple of really bad turnovers for Northwestern at the end of the game. Also for a team that rarely turns the ball over and is actually, I think, even better team than Purdue when it comes to holding onto the ball, which is impressive because Purdue's elite at that as well. At the end of the day, I think I was just glad to see him keep his composure and keep making enough winning plays despite things going poorly for him at a lot of different points in the game. And that's what we need from him, regardless whether or not some of those shots are going to fall. Keep making the winning plays, make the right choices. Don't get caught up in trying to force shots or force assists. As I keep saying, let the game come to you. Take what the defense gives you. But Fletcher Lawyer also had some great opportunities to capitalize in this game that he just couldn't knock down. Northwestern must have went to the Purdue school of leaving guys wide open on the 3-point line and just kind of letting them shoot. And we capitalized, plenty. We had 9 threes on the night for 38%. But Fletcher was only 2 for 6, and they had the one free three late where it was an opportunity for Purdue to run the clock out really low, up 2. And instead, I don't necessarily blame him for taking it. Best 3-point shooter on our team, wide open in the corner, but misses a 3 and gives Northwestern the ball back with under 30 seconds to go. And thankfully, Northwestern turned the ball over again to give it right back. But yeah, he ends up he plays 31 minutes, ends up with 10 points on 4 of 9 shooting, those 2 for 6 from three. 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 turnovers, and a steal. So not a great game, not horrible for him either, though. Quite frankly, if he literally makes one more of those threes, if he makes whether it's that 3 at the end or one of his other pretty darn open threes that he got over the course of this game, you're going to talk about that stat line a lot differently. You would have had 13 points and shooting 50% from 3. So not going to complain about it. I want him to shoot his open shots. And I trust him with the rebound that he's had, that he's going to make those shots and make, closer to the 40-50% of his threes more often than not. So I'm not really worried about that. But just kind of a quick run through of Northwestern as well. I mentioned Nick Martinelli, the lone senior on this team. really had an amazing game on his senior night. We were able to spoil. He goes for 28 points, 9 of 19 shooting, 2 for 5 from three, a perfect 8 for 8 from the free throw line. Only one rebound, which is surprising to me. But I guess he's not necessarily super huge, but he's just a pretty athletic guy that moves around well. So I figured he would have gotten on the glass a little bit better. But he does also have 3 assists and a turnover. And other than him, it pretty much was just Martinelli and Jaden Reed. In the absence of Jake West, who was I want to say, I believe he's a freshman guard that they have been playing a lot more recently. Jaden Reed really stepped up in his absence. He ends up with 16 points on 6 of 10 shooting, 2 for 3 from three, 2 for 2 from the free throw line with 4 assists. 3 turnovers, 2 steals, and a block. So a pretty full stat line for him. But those are the only two of those guys from Northwestern that ended up in double figures. Everybody else was, 8, 7, 3, 2, and 2. So not their best offensive performance. But if you look at the shooting metrics, 51% from the floor, 44% from three. They were 7 for 16 and 11 for 12 from the free throw line. So they shot 92% from the free throw line. But where things, really started to dip for them was the rebounding battle. They only end up with 14 assists on their 24 makes, so it wasn't a ton of, great team basketball. They only turn over the ball 7 times, so not that bad. They did end up with 7 steals from our, 14 turnovers that we had, and I'll talk about Purdue's team stats here in a little bit. But, not a great game for them, not a horrible game for them. I think when it comes down to it, it was just a really low possession game, which is why the score ended up as low as it is, despite both teams shooting over 50% from the floor. Um, but it was just kind of one of those games, and they needed a couple other guys to provide some support that they really just didn't get. And it also hurts a little bit that Martinelli may have scored 28, but he did shoot under 50% from the floor, whereas a lot of other guys were, they had 2 guys on the bench, 1 for 1, and 3 for 4 from Jordan Clayton off the bench. So not their best, not horrible. But moving back over to Purdue, I mentioned the rebounding margin, and this was a huge one for Purdue. We should have won it, and I'm glad that we did, and I'm glad that we did in convincing fashion. Northwestern is an even worse rebounding team than Ohio State was, and clearly we struggled with them. But we win this rebounding battle 29 to 15, and that was 20 to 11 on the defensive end and 9 to 4 on the offensive end. I think a big part of that was Clough and TKR being in the game and rebounding well. That was the story of the Ohio State game, them being in foul trouble and having to go with a bunch of weird lineups that messed up, our rotations and allowed us to get bullied on the boards. Well, those two combined for 17 rebounds total, 10 for TKR, 7 for Clough, and 5 of them offensive. 2 offensive rebounds for TKR, 3 offensive for Clough. We need those two in the game and rebounding well. And it was good to see that they were able to do it in this game, but they were supposed to. This was not like some big surprise, like, oh, you know, the anomaly performance of out rebounding a really good rebounding team. But again, no matter the game, we still need that out of them. Another thing was the turnovers. I mentioned our issues in the first half that we kind of cleaned up in the second half. We ended up with 14 turnovers total, 4 of them for TKR, 4 for Braden, and then 2 each for Clough and Lawyers. So majority of those turnovers, in fact, almost all of those turnovers came from the starting lineup, just 1 for Benter on the bench. And it was just kind of the way that the game was going and the way that we were struggling to move the ball in the first half with their chaos and rotations and getting hands in passing lanes and forcing us to have some really weird passes. I think the most interesting part of it, though, is Purdue capitalized off of turnovers better than Northwestern did. And that, with as close of a game as this was, that made a huge difference. We ended up with 12 points off of their just 7 turnovers, but they only ended up with 15 points off of Purdue's 14 turnovers. So we had double the turnovers, and they only ended up with 3 more points off of turnovers than we did. So it's huge to be able to capitalize on those extra opportunities. And overall, it was a very even matchup. We made up for for losing possessions on turnovers by rebounding as well as we did, both, getting 9 offensive rebounds, but also this keeping them off of the offensive glass very much. They only end up with 4. So that kind of evened out the possession game there. So that was, big time in terms of keeping us in this game when a lot of things weren't going well for us. Moving over to the assists, we had 22 assists on 26 made shots. It was way different half to half because we only had 8 assists to go with our 9 turnovers in the first half, but we moved the ball really well in the second half once we settled in, and they decided to go to that almost more switching than the aggressive trapping double like they did in the first half. I will ever forever wonder why they went to that with how much success they had in the first half. But 9 assists from Braden obviously is great. But in general, everybody chipped in. Only Jacobson and Meyer did not wind up with an assist off the bench there. And another thing to highlight is just Northwestern's first half versus second half performances in this game, but also just as a whole. They showed a graphic on the broadcast just as we went to halftime for Northwestern, specifically against ranked teams, where ranked teams have outscored Northwestern by just short of 4 points in the first half. But you get into the second half and things just seem to fall apart, whether it's that these ranked teams just seem to adjust really well, or Northwestern starts to, make more mistakes or kind of crumble under some of the pressure of having a lead or just playing better, playing a close game against some of these ranked teams. They get outscored by an average of 14.6 points against ranked opponents in the second half. And it wasn't any better in this one, except for the fact that they didn't lose the first half. They typically lose the first half by around 4. Well, they won the first half by 9 points in this one. It was 34-25 at halftime. Much better than, their average. But then they turn around and lose the second half by, you guessed it, 13 points. So right around that average. It was 45-32 in the second half. Those 45 points for Purdue were just electric. And quite frankly, they just could not stop Purdue's momentum when it started. So it was not a pretty game. It was not a super fun game to watch outside of us getting, hot in the second half because we were still down. We were still making a lot of mistakes going into literally just those last couple minutes of the game. I mean, Northwestern led for 75% of this game. But it's important to be able to win those games, whether it's pretty, whether or not it's a team you're supposed to be in a close game with or not. It's important to be able to grind out those close games. And that's what I'm going to take away from this game outside of the negativity, outside of the still shaky performance. We played a gritty performance and we came out with a win in an arena that we have really struggled to win in against far or with far better teams in the past. I believe Purdue was number 1 both of the last 2 times that they came into Welsh-Ryan Arena and lost within these last 3 seasons. So again, we'll take it. And we just got to use that as additional momentum coming into this, final game of the regular season. And speaking of that, coming up next, the curtain call, the encore. It's senior night for this amazing, unbelievable senior class. It's the last game in Mackey Arena for Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, and Trey Kaufman-Redd. I don't care what you feel about how this season has gone, what this senior class has been as leaders and focal points of this team. We would not have such unbelievably high expectations if it were not for the likes of Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, and Trey Kaufman-Redd. Add Clough in, although the jury is still out on the possibility of gaining another year through the legal system with all these cases out there. But this class deserves every bit of your heart and soul Saturday when they take on the Wisconsin Badgers to finish out this regular season. But that's all I've got for today. One more regular season recap, then it's officially postseason time. Still so much more ahead of us, but we really appreciate the support, the views, and the comments so very much. Keep an eye out for all of the videos still to come, and for Drew and I to put out a link to our Running the Table bracket challenge as we get closer to Selection Sunday. But if you want more from us, like, comment, and subscribe, and until next time, I'm out.